thank you so much for viewing my channel, which is called as Crazy Geek. Thank you so much for each and every subscriber and viewers who are supporting me from the day one until now. So as you all know that Crazy Geek is a platform to bridge the gap between what's being studied in your universities or college, what is being applied, and I also have various topics that I'm covering on a weekly basis as well as on a monthly basis. So today we have an amazing speaker, Mr. Mark, and he is a phenomenally amazing educator as well. So before going into his introduction, I'm going to just share a little bit about myself. So I am Miss Lavanya. I am an ACCA tutor for Advanced Audit and Assurance and Audit and Assurance. And I'm so passionate about guiding and teaching students in this topic and in this subject. So that's a little bit about myself. So hi, Mark. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well, Lavanya. Very well indeed. So,
that's amazing.
Yes.
So a little bit about yourself, Mark.
Okay, well, it's
yeah.
Where would you like me to start, Lavanya?
You can start all the way from your college until now.
Okay. Yeah. So I started off rather unusually, perhaps for some of your viewers. I started off doing a physics degree, of all things, and I wasn't really very successful at that, as you'll probably hear later on. I had a spectacularly unsuccessful run of exam results doing physics. So at the end of my degree, which I scraped through by the skin of my teeth, on the back of a good project. At the end of that degree, I got a training contract as a chartered accountant. So that was great. And I really struggled, I guess, with those 3 years of training to be an accountant. I had to work very, very hard. But I did get through. And I got first-time passes in all of my professional exams, which at the time was quite unusual in the UK at that time. And then I went traveling. So having had 3 years of audit experience, I then went off and did lots and lots of temporary assignments for various different organizations around the world. So film companies and skiing companies and all sorts of other companies. So that was wonderful. So that gave me lots of stories to tell later on when I was a lecturer. And then I went back to university, and I felt, I guess the reason I did physics, I always used to say, is because I wanted to know what made the world go round. And then I realized it wasn't physics that made the world go round, it was money that made the world go round. So I trained to be an accountant. And then I thought, well, maybe it's not money that makes the world go round. Maybe it's politics and power. So I went back and I did a politics degree, or started a politics degree at the London School of Economics. And that was fun. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed it because I met some really interesting people. And but I guess a year into that, I decided I was going to migrate to Australia. So I went off to Australia for 7 years and became a lecturer. And the rest, I guess, is history. So I spent about 7 years in Australia, and then came back to the UK and joined BPP and became their lead tutor in financial management, which was fun, great. And then became a freelancer and worked for BPP for a bit as a freelancer, and then went off and worked for a group called the Association of Corporate Treasurers, which is, again, a fun little place to go, and spent 20 years there. God, the time just flew. And finished up there around about 2016, having sort of got into online learning around about 2005. And then decided to come back to my roots and start training ACCA, which I did for Liverpool University for a bit, and then create a platform for other tutors. So that's what we've got now, is a little platform called FME Learn Online, which has got a dozen, quite good tutors, I would say.
They are amazing, Mark. They are
amazing. So lots of ACCA gurus and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's all been fun.
That's
So
amazing.
is
I
that enough
mean,
about me, Lavanya?
it's more than enough, Mark. So I am not going to ask this question. How old are you? But you are young at heart. I can see that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm
Absolutely.
not going to
Definitely
ask,
like to be young
yeah,
at heart.
I'm not going to ask your age at all because there's so many experience that you went through. It looks like as if you're a 100-year-old person. But I know you are young at heart. So I'm not going to ask that question. But let's go into my very first question here for you. What was the main reason for you to pursue in this academic line as an educator in the first place?
Yeah. Okay. So why did I end up in training? Well, it's all about people, isn't it? People are really fascinating animals, I guess, or whatever. I mean, they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and they've got all sorts of different views on the world. And when you're in a classroom, if you can get a two-way interaction going with people,
Mhm.
then that's really positive. So yeah,
That's how all
best way to
started.
change the world.
Exactly. I think that one something is one of the reason I would say I actually get connected with teaching and all of that. Trust me, Mark, my ambition or any nothing to do with teaching at all since young. Still school time, I never had an ambition called a teacher or a lecturer, nothing like that. But somehow I ended up here. So I think it's a beautiful journey that we all want to hear from your side, actually, which is my second question. Based on your experience, do you think the younger generation that are studying accounting profession, to be specific, to become an accountant or move for entrepreneurship side of it? What do you think based on whatever experience you have gone through?
Yeah. Okay. So I've ended up, I guess a lot of people would say I've ended up as an entrepreneur. So I've ended up setting up a business, which is, reasonably successful in my terms anyway, and seems to be growing very fast at the moment. So yeah, I've ended up as an entrepreneur. But I didn't start out with that intention. I chose to be an accountant because I wanted to stay close to my then girlfriend. Of course, that didn't last, but these are the reasons you do things in life, don't you? You do things
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. So is accounting a great thing for a potential entrepreneur to do? Yeah, but most entrepreneurs are not accountants. They end up needing accountants, but they don't start off as accountants. But being an accountant, I mean, those 3 years for me as an auditor were magical because I got to go into small businesses, big businesses, medium-sized businesses, and some were failing, some were successful, some were, there was all sorts of different businesses, different business models. And so I could learn by their mistakes. And that's a wonderful way to learn, by somebody else's mistakes rather than just your own.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that because I learn from other people's mistakes and that's how I grew as well. Thank you so much, Mark, for that answer. So it's basically both ways. So it's going to be accountants and entrepreneurs at the same time. My story, I actually wanted to become an entrepreneur eventually, and that's why I chose accounting. So yeah, that was my intention. But yours is a bit different. But that's fine. Let's look at the next question. Do you think accounting professional qualification is helpful for entrepreneurship? If yes, maybe you want to give some of the examples from your experiences.
Yeah. Okay. So is it helpful to be an accountant if you want to be an entrepreneur? Of course. I mean, the first thing is to be an entrepreneur, you have to have a good idea. You have to have some special calling, if you like, some passion that you want to really push. If you've got that passion, then it's also got to be something that other people want. So my son's an interesting example. He wants to be a composer, but he's decided that it's very unlikely. Well, he's decided he doesn't want money to be associated with his passion. So that's not really a very good start as an entrepreneur. You've got to marry up the two things,
Yes.
don't you? There's got to be both passion, and other people have got to want that product that you're offering. So yeah, so is accounting a great start to that? Yes, it is, but it's not enough on its own. You've got to have that passion first, and then the accounting can add a skill set. It can provide you with a tool that can be really useful as an entrepreneur.
Amazing. I have one additional question, Mark. This is something that has been running in my mind as well. You see, we are told that as an accountant, you're very, very pessimistic. You always think the bad things that can happen and all of that. But being an entrepreneur, you need to always be optimistic, right? To a certain extent, I mean, that's how it is, two different mindsets. So how do we balance that, or how do you balance that? Yeah.
Okay, that's a really good question. So when I was training to be an accountant, we used to call that prudence. Yeah. So, and as part of my life story, I guess, I ended up in a class as a qualified accountant. I ended up in a class with a guy called Ray Chambers, who was a very famous accounting academic. And his favorite phrase was that prudence means deliberate misstatement. So you're being deliberately, you're lying. You're saying things are worse than they really are because you're an accountant. And so gradually accountants have realized that actually that's not the way to go, that we want to present the information in a fair and balanced way if we want to give a true and fair view. So yeah, even within accounting, that old-fashioned idea of the accountant being pessimistic has sort of taken a turn in the other direction. But are we pessimistic? Yeah, I mean, I've seen fraud. I've seen all sorts of stuff in my career. So yeah, your eyes are opened to those possibilities, but your eyes are also opened to the good things. So you've got to keep that balance. If you let the bad things overwhelm you, then yeah, you're not gonna fly as an entrepreneur. But equally, if you ignore the bad things, that's not going to work either. It's about you're a tightrope artist. You're on this narrow path, and you need to keep your balance.
Amazing, Mark. I think through experience is where we're going to learn that skill to strike a balance between these two.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it's easy to say, but when you need to practically do it, that's where the challenge is. And I think I'm actually also going through that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark, to let me know that okay, you need to have a balance of both of it. Okay, next question. What are the challenges the students face when they start applying the knowledge at work? Whatever they learn based on your experience. Maybe one or two challenges they will face.
Okay, so I remember a challenge when I first started, and I started a while ago. And when I first got into my first temporary assignment as a qualified accountant, I made a mistake in one of my bank reconciliations, and I was a fair way out. It was only one number I got wrong, but it just happened to have a few zeros after it. So that almost led to the insolvency of the company. That wasn't a good thing to get wrong. And so I guess the lesson I learned from that was that there's no point in doing your numbers or doing your bookkeeping or doing anything without having that bigger picture in mind as to what a reasonable answer should be. So I guess what I needed to have done is I needed to have sat back, having done that task, and just learned how to double check. So one of the things that you're always told this as a student, if you've written your assignment, go back and reread it before you put it in. Yeah. And how many students do that? Well, some do, lots don't. Yeah. You got to learn that lesson. You really got to learn that lesson when you go into practice, because you can't afford for your boss to be the one who's rereading your assignment or checking your numbers without you having done it first.
Oh, wow.
So I guess that's one thing. And the other thing is that most of what you learn is not going to be relevant to what you do at work. Most of your work will be a very steep learning curve. Even if you're an auditor, many of the processes that you learn will be based on your firm's procedures. It's not going to be based on international auditing standards or anything like that. So humility is a wonderful tool to have in your armory. You know, you've got to recognize that you're learning. You've got to learn to be a good listener, and you've just got to do as you're told, I guess.
Wow.
So long as you're not being told to do the wrong thing.
Yes. Very, very nicely said, Mark. I think I wish I had this when I was starting off my journey. But
so do I.
Yeah, because I felt like when I started off work, I was actually very, very particular of not making mistakes. So when I make the mistake, I didn't take it as a lesson, but instead I go very hard on myself. I told that, oh, this is not a field that I'm going to go back into. I'm very bad at it. You know, taking things very negatively and not moving forward, not taking as a lesson, but instead just give up and say, this is not something that I want to do anymore.
Yeah, so mistakes are to be celebrated, aren't you? I mean, every time you make a mistake, you've learned something. I mean, that's really good news, you know. So long as you leave your pride at the door and you can accept that, humility.
Yeah, I think that's what I was working on, Mark. It's really the ego that you're not accepting that you are making the mistake. Really, I had a very huge ego in the beginning of my working years. Luckily I had mentors, wise people who told me, you know what, if you don't change, you're not going to grow at all. You know, that hit me hard, and I went through the hard way, and then I started being humble and started accepting my mistakes and started learning that this is a process. Yeah, enough of my story. I'm going to go with my last question. Share with me the one mistake that you made when you were younger, which you want to change now, Mark. Yeah.
Okay, well, there's so many to choose from.
Just one.
So many to choose from. So just one. Okay.
Yeah, top one.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So I guess the biggest mistake, apart from that, you know, being £100,000 out on my bank reconciliation, was failing all those exams at university. So I failed 19 out of 20 exams in a row, one after the other, in my physics degree. And I did manage to pass the philosophy of science, but all of the other exams, the quantum mechanics, all the other stuff, not a chance. So yeah, that was my biggest mistake.
Okay. So yeah, the mistake actually lead you to who you are today, I believe. But yeah, thank you so much, Mark, for this wonderful session with you. So is there any final words?
Well, I was just thinking back to that mistake. Actually, that mistake turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life, because whenever I get a struggling student now, I can honestly and genuinely say, I do understand how difficult it can be to get something sometimes. And I guess that gave me the patience to be a good tutor, because actually some of the best tutors are not those people who find things easy. They're those people who can relate to their students, who can treat their students as human beings, if you like, rather than just objects. And I think to be able to do that, you have to have that point of contact with your student. So yeah, failing all those exams taught me another lesson as well, which is it's not about ability, it's about plain hard work often. And I thought I wasn't smart enough to do it. Actually, the reason was I was a bit lazy. I needed to do more work. So I didn't make that mistake again when it came to the accounting. So yeah.
It's a hard
Sorry,
truth to accept.
I tend to go on a bit.
No, it's a hard truth to accept that you are a lazy person, right? Sometimes, I I had to accept that actually you are an easy person, Lavanya. You need to work on it, then you get it. Thank you so much, Mark, for your time. I really appreciate your time. Is there any other final suggestions or conclusions you want to tell to the students out there?
I guess, yeah, follow your heart, follow your passion, recognize that sometimes that's going to involve hard work. It's going to involve you doing things that you don't want to do sometimes. Get yourself a mentor, someone who you can use as a mirror to
Mm,
ask those critical questions, particularly if you're training as an accountant in practice, because it's very easy to come up with ethical dilemmas that you don't know how to handle. So to have somebody to talk to who has been through the process can be really, really useful. You know, these are the basic things. I'm sure they're all obvious, but I just wanted to say them again.
but you have beautifully said, Mark. Follow your heart. That's the end of it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark. That's all I have for today. And I will see you again, maybe another session.
Sounds
Bye.
good. Thanks. Thanks,
Thanks.
Lavanya.
Bye,
Thank
Mark.
you. Bye.